Greg for being so generous in sharing his story and challenges and his journey. What we've got planned now is we're going to ask each panel discussant a specific question, and then after they've responded to the question, we're going to open it up for a little bit more discussion. And Larry and I will introduce the panel discussants as the question comes up. And so our first discussant is Don James. And Don is a graduate of the Master of Occupational Therapy program at the University of Manitoba, College of Rehabilitation Sciences, as am I, a graduate from there. She has been working at Nine Circles Community Health Center, a primary care sexually transmitted and bloodborne infection specialist health center, as the Manitoba HIV program occupational therapist since 2010. So my question to you, Dawn, is we noticed how Greg has really been able to use his resources to help manage his HIV-related disability and to promote his health. And what are some strategies to engage people living with HIV in self-management approaches to care?
Okay, thank you. Before I answer the question, I would like to just quickly explain where I work so that I can provide you with some context of my perspective. So up on the slide there, you'll see some of my wonderful colleagues who I've had the privilege of working with for the past 8 years, as was mentioned, as well as our community-based healthcare center, Nine Circles, which is where I work. So I'm part of the Manitoba HIV program, which provides specialized care and support to approximately 1,285 people living with HIV across the province. We have 2 Winnipeg-based sites, so Nine Circles, as you see up there, which is the community-based support. We also have the Health Sciences Center outpatient support clinic, which is through our largest hospital in Manitoba, and 1 Brandon-based site, which is 7th Street Access Center. Nine Circles is interdisciplinary and includes the work of many wonderful people. We have primary care physicians, primary care nurses, STI testing nurses. We have so many people I actually have to read off the list here so I don't forget. Clinical pharmacist, medical lab assistants, outreach workers, social workers, health educators, cultural support worker, mental health therapist, dietitian, and occupational therapist myself. So when, in preparation for talking today, I actually consulted with my colleagues, and it's so validating and reassuring to realize that we come from a similar framework and lens, although we work in different perspectives. As mentioned by Greg, readiness and motivation are extremely important when we're looking at self-management. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the approach that we take at Nine Circles, because we are a community-based clinic, we have the very much the privilege of working for people on a long-term basis. So I've worked 8 years there. Some of my clients I've been working with for 8 years. The first step that we typically take when working with an individual on self-management is to assess their readiness and determine where they are. The approach that we take, and it'll be familiar to many people here today, is the trans-theoretical model. So I have it up there, and I have it in plain language. This is my favorite one to take a look at, and I use it when speaking with clients. In the first stage, it's pre-contemplative, so the person is not thinking seriously about making any change. There isn't much in terms of readiness at this stage. They may not be interested in any help of any kind at this stage. So frequently, if a client is referred for service and they come in and they're not really very ready for change at that point, I don't discharge them at that point. I still do connect and work with the person. The way that we do that is we build rapport, so we help develop that relationship with the person, earn some trust. We provide education in a respectful way. We discuss the person's hopes and dreams, and as part of that process, we try to find out if there are more pressing concerns than what came in the referral. So perhaps the referral comes in and they're saying this person needs to look at getting back to work. But the individual who comes through my door says to me, actually, I don't have housing right now. Well, that's going to be our first starting point. Or maybe their main concern is, actually, I'm dealing with chronic pain. Well, that's where we're going to start. At Nine Circles, some of the professionals that will provide support as well at this point is our outreach support team. They're these wonderful workers whose whole goal is to engage with the client, develop a relationship, provide them with transportation, and help them solidify their goals. We also have a wonderful health education team who provide education on HIV 101, so HIV basics. Harm reduction education, and they have a really, I think, great program called Dream Big, which is casting a wide net, they say is what it is. So they cast a wide net, and they ask the individuals to envision what their perfect life would look like. So very motivational interviewing for those who are familiar with that. And take a look, what does your ideal life look like? And based off of that, maybe take a look at, you felt like you weren't ready for some change, but maybe there are some places to start. Moving on there to number 2, so the contemplation stage, the person is starting to consider modifying their behavior. Maybe there's some ambivalence there, they're teeter-tottering, weighing the pros and cons. At this point, again, we're providing education, building that relationship, discussing goals, maybe helping them tease out some of those pros and cons, and doing some motivational interviewing. At Nine Circles, we also have a program called What's Your Goal? It's a program where individuals can come on a monthly basis, discuss what their goal is in a peer support environment, and then there's that accountability as well. There's that real peer support network that's happening. We have a program from our mental health therapist called Feeling Better, which is a harm reduction program. It's facilitated by the mental health therapist, but again, very peer support in nature. At the 3rd stage, we have preparation. This is when the person has an interest and an intent on taking action. They might not know what direction to go in at that phase, but that's the important thing is that they've made the decision that they would like to make a change. They're gathering information and looking for support. So at this stage, as an occupational therapist and other professionals at our clinic, we tend to help develop a plan in conjunction with the client. It needs to be very client-driven. They're the individuals who are going to be the expert in their own lives, so they're going to know what's realistic in terms of going forward. We also refer to other services as needed. It was mentioned earlier today, these wonderful self-management programs. Get Better Together is what it's called in Manitoba, and then the Positive Self-Management Program. Those are 2 group-based programs that we have at Nine Circles. At the action stage, the person believes they can manage and are actively making some changes. At this stage, we're providing information and support as needed. I find it's a pretty wonderful stage to have a privilege of being in with the client. And then finally we have the maintenance stage, which is where there is sustained change and self-management. At this stage, it's very important to maintain connection with our clients. So at this stage, we're evaluating to determine if the client is satisfied with their ability to manage, and then also providing education and support as needed. So again, that's very client-directed. Evidence has suggested that in order for individuals to successfully self-manage, they require sustained support. So sometimes, there might be the idea that we stop providing support once the person is actively maintaining or is in the action stage of change, but actually evidence suggests that we need to provide that support on a sustained basis. So one of my main messages is that as service providers, it's our job to share our knowledge and provide encouragement. As part of this process, we have to respect the client's priorities and go at their pace, whatever that pace is. And that's maybe easy for me to say from a community perspective because I have all that time. I realize not everybody does. We can help the client to set realistic goals and maybe help them to break them down into more manageable steps. So sometimes people come in with these large goals of, okay, I want to go back to school and I want to enter this profession, but I also need to deal with my chronic pain and my sleep issues. So it's our job as professionals to help them break them down into manageable goals and help figure out how they can navigate that process. But the goals always need to be client-driven. They should not be coming from us as professionals. We cannot be coming in and saying, this is what you need to be doing. That's just a recipe for failure, I think, on all ends. And it can be very destructive to the relationship. And then finally, there we go. Okay, so this is a wonderful website. And it has lots of research on there about the some positive self-management programs, the Get Better Together programs. They do have an online format, so you can refer clients to use this online. But it's also important to just consider what's realistic for the person's life and just what their preferences are. Would a group format work well? Would it be maybe online, as a lot of people, may prefer that format where it's anonymous, and or they can just go whenever they have the time, for those who are quite busy? Or is it better for them to meet one-on-one with a service provider? Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Any comments from the panel, or I invite any comments or questions from the audience as well? I could use what Stephanie did last time. Mary?
I just wanted to ask, is there peer support? Is there peer support? Do you have other PHAs in other positions within your clinic?
Thank you for that question. That's a wonderful question. So at Nine Circles, that's something that where we are, we're constantly trying to work towards. As part of the Get Better Together program and the Positive Self-Management program, they do make it so that when individuals take the training, then they are then encouraged to become facilitators themselves, so that there is that peer support. We have found that whenever there is a peer, I feel like the knowledge and the information that comes from them just has so much more, it's just more rich because they're coming from a lived experience perspective. So we're always trying to encourage that. We have been working with some clients to try to encourage them to even create some of their own programs that maybe as professionals we can just come in with our knowledge piece and help them direct it a little bit, but we're hoping to have them maybe manage it. We haven't had that piece yet. We have a couple of programs run by the mental health therapists where they help facilitate and maybe guide discussions. However, it's very peer driven in terms of the content of what's going on and the information that's provided. Our health educators also do a really good job of that, just facilitating but really letting it be more client driven. Thank you for that question. Does that answer? Yeah, wonderful.
Other comments or reflections? I will turn it over to Larry.
Okay, thank you. That's a very impressive program. I think every community in Canada would like one of those. So we're going to we'll probably ask you how you get it funded. So for our next panelist, we're going to call upon a physiotherapist. And we're calling upon Caitlin Warren, who's working now at the Casey House in Toronto with the Interdisciplinary Day Health Program there. Prior to that, she was with a student placement with Positive Living Niagara and St. Catharines. And my notes tell me that this was the first physiotherapy role placement in a Canadian community-based organization, HIV organization, so congrats. But our question for you, from Greg's video, we saw that he really had definite goals and priorities in his life. So I'm wondering, when you're doing your job and working with people or adults living with HIV, how do you help them set their goals and priorities, especially when they have multiple comorbidities? And you might want to do some introductions as well with your program.
Yes, thank you. So I am the physiotherapy resident in the day health program at Casey House. Sue did a really great job talking about Casey House, so I won't talk too much at length about that. But with the physiotherapy services that we provide, a lot of the reasons for referral tends to be primarily pain management, both acute and chronic pain, a lot of it being chronic pain. But we also get referrals for things like deconditioning, falls, and various mobility issues. Our clients are quite complex, as Sue talked about. They do tend to live with at least 5 comorbidities. So similar to what we heard Greg talk about, our clients are living with a number of comorbidities, and that can be challenging. There's a lot going on. And so when I meet with my clients, my approach in helping them set their goals actually uses a lot of the strategies that we talked about here today. So one of the very first things that I like to do is try to create space to have a conversation. Right away, get the client's perspective, hear in their words what is going on, what challenges are they experiencing, what are some of the things that they're having difficulties doing, what are the things that they want to be doing, and yeah, really just hearing from them. With the understanding that being episodic disability, their needs are going to change over time as well, and sort of opening up that space and just making that safe area to have that discussion too as things change. I do use something called the HIV Disability Questionnaire, and that's been a great tool too, because I find there's so many other like when people come to see me as a physiotherapy resident, I think a lot of times right away they think, okay, we're going to be discussing our physical health. But with tools like the HDQ, we're talking about cognition, we're talking about uncertainty, we're talking about challenges with social integration and things like that. And so I think right away it kind of creates that safe space to continue having discussions in different domains of their health. In terms of when we get to goal setting with more physio-related stuff, and when I watched Greg's video, it kind of made me, I use the WHO's ICF model a lot. So we heard Greg talk about how he had this pain in his knees. And so that's something that's talking about the body structure and function impairments in this ICF model. But it goes beyond that pain, because then what that means was that Greg was no longer able to do those flutter kicks and whip kicks. So there's an activity limitation. And then from there, it's affecting his role as a swimmer, which is something that's very meaningful to him. And so when I'm able to kind of use that model and go through different areas in people's lives, I get to that sort of meaningful part. And really, that's where I want to sort of center that goal around. But even once we set those goals, sometimes clients aren't really ready to act on those things yet. We talked about that a little bit again today. So it could be that they feel they have reduced motivation. Maybe it can be really anxiety provoking. They're worried that maybe if I exercise, my pain might get a little bit worse, or I might have a bit more fatigue. They may have had a prior negative experience with exercise. And maybe, we have good days and bad days. So what's that going to look like when I try to integrate some exercise or movement into my life? And these are all very valid concerns. And this is where I really try to meet clients where they're at. And basically, I'm trying to help identify barriers with the client and kind of problem solve through those things. Using things, language. So again, we talked about exercise. Sometimes that sounds really prescriptive. It can be overwhelming. So using terms like movement. Most of us can incorporate some form of movement into our day-to-day, and so that way it seems a little bit less daunting. Like how Dawn said, breaking down what some of those end goals might look like into more manageable pieces. Things like that, and using motivational interviewing to make sure that that client remains center of their care. They have a role in what they want to do in that care in terms of goal setting. And in that sense, they get to kind of regain that control that, again, Greg spoke about in terms of, doing the best that they can to meet those goals.